What's up, everybody, and welcome back into another vacation mode episode of The Lawyer You Know. And after my video yesterday about Alex Spiro and Tony Buzbee going at it in the Jay-Z case and P. Diddy case, a lot of you guys were sending me questions and things. And again, I'm going to do a deeper dive at some point, kind of an overview of everything on a podcast, hopefully here soon. But on Twitter, BRRK sent me a video of Alex Spiro, the attorney for Jay-Z, giving a press briefing PowerPoint presentation for 30 plus minutes on why what the plaintiff said cannot be true, on why his client, Jay-Z, did not and could not have done this based on the allegations. And I honestly don't remember if I have ever in my life seen something specifically like this. I've seen prosecutors give pressers and say why a defendant is guilty. I've seen criminal defense attorneys and civil defense attorneys get up and say, my client absolutely didn't do it for X, Y, and Z reason. I've seen plaintiff's attorney give press conferences where their clients read statements and read complaints. But I don't know if I've ever seen a civil defense attorney get up and do a presentation quite like this seems to be. I haven't watched it yet. So this is going to be our first watch, our first look at it, gut reaction to Alex Spiro putting on a full-blown PowerPoint presentation as to why Jay-Z did not do this. Let's get to it. And we're going to jump right into the presser. I'll make myself even a little smaller so we can see the entirety of this PowerPoint presentation and what Alex Spiro had to say and why he thinks Jay-Z did not and could not have committed these heinous acts that he has been accused of. And we're going to jump right into the PowerPoint presentation. We're going to watch together. I don't have quite as much time as I did yesterday, but I really wanted to watch this, and I figure why not watch it with you guys. So hit that like button if you guys haven't already. And if you're interested in this content, continue to let me know in the comment section, and we'll continue to follow the Jay-Z P. Diddy saga, especially with the Battle of the Lawyers. This was from, about 2 weeks ago. So some of you may have already seen this. I had not seen it, especially spelled out here as to why he believes Jay-Z is provably innocent of all these allegations. But this is going to be really interesting. I am excited to watch this because there's no rules of evidence here, right? He just gets to go. He gets to make arguments. He gets to connect dots. People can say this is like a closing argument, but it's even better than a closing argument from a lawyer's perspective because you don't have those pesky rules to deal with. You don't have anybody objecting. You don't have a judge saying you can't say this, or you can't prove that, or that's not coming in because it's not reliable. You don't have any of that. So there's so much more coming into this PowerPoint presentation probably than will ever come in a court of law, but this is the court of public opinion. And this is absolutely a PR battle between big shot lawyers, celebrity clients, and a lot of money on the line, a lot of eyeballs on it, a lot of public interest. And so that's why this is being taken to the pressers, right? Again, I said this off the top. I don't remember anything quite this elaborate being done by a civil defense lawyer, a presser being called. But again, Jay-Z, Beyonce, P. Diddy, some of the biggest names on the planet are involved. So let's take a listen to how Alex Spiro explains his client's innocence here.
When you're trying to evaluate whether something occurred, you have to look at different pieces of the narrative: the location, where it happened, the witnesses, who were they, what did they say, the details. Details are very important in time. So we start off with the location. And according to their complaint, after approximately 20 minutes, she arrived at a white house with a U-shaped driveway and a gate. There is no such location in New York, 20 minutes from Radio City. It does not exist. There is no such location. We don't know whether they created a location in order to try to get jurisdiction in New York so they could bring this case in New York, or whether they just didn't do their homework. But any New Yorker knows there is no such location. Beyond that, this was supposed to take.
It's a pretty big deal, right? Pretty big deal if you say this happened in a location that is provably and demonstrably false and not true and impossible. It's not a good look, right? That's not a good look. And I'm thinking about this from the plaintiff's perspective, okay? Since what we do a lot of times is the plaintiff's personal injury, where we would be suing companies or even individuals from time to time. 90+% of our lawsuits are against companies, insurance companies, or big businesses. But once in a while, there's an individual client. So if you're going to file a lawsuit like this, and these are the kind of details that start to come out, I'll let you know in my mind when I start getting worried about, is what my client told me true? And we'll see if he has any of the goods that really would make me scared if I was the plaintiff's attorney in this case, make me take a second look like, is this actually true? Do I have a good faith basis? Do I believe my client, or has enough information come out where I've got to talk to my client and say, hey, I'm not sure we can prove this by a preponderance of the evidence, right? Because it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a civil case. It's the greater weight of the evidence, 51-ish%. but it's not a good start for the plaintiffs, which I expect this entire thing. It's like when I say, when one side files a motion, you should want to side with them. You should think this is a good argument. You should want to agree with them. Any good lawyer that writes a motion like that, and any good lawyer, which I would expect here, he's going to convince us this ain't a good case for the plaintiff.
Taking place at Mr. Combs' after party, according to them. When you look at the homes associated with Mr. Combs during that period of time, and even not during that period of time, none of them matches. He had a townhouse, he had a house in the Hamptons hours away, and he had homes in New Jersey, but not at that time. None of the homes work, the location doesn't work, because this never happened. And again, when you really bear down on the location and his whereabouts, you quickly realize, because there's photographic evidence and witnesses are coming forward, that Mr. Carter was a commercial establishment after the VMAs. He wasn't at a house. Well, unfortunately for them, they needed to create this house in order to create the narrative. But he wasn't at a White House that did not exist. And this is a photograph of him at a location after the VMAs.
By the way, the language, like, he had to create a narrative. He had to force it to be in New York to get this jurisdiction. That's the type of language that's a little hyperbolic. Some judges don't like it, obviously. It may rub people the wrong way, but he has a very purposeful reason for calling this presser, calling this briefing, presenting and preparing this PowerPoint presentation, right? But you can think about and see all the work, all the time, all the details that have gone into this. Additionally, though, I must say, from the other side of it, because again, it's the first time I'm watching it, so my mind's kind of spinning here, wheels are turning. They were able to get a lot of information. They were able to put up this timeline. They were able to prepare a defense, even though the witness has, or the plaintiff has remained anonymous. So how much prejudice is this actually creating for Jay-Z and his defense if they're able to do all this without knowing the name? They probably know the name, but without knowing the name, they're able to do a lot of this defense. So how much is it really prejudicing them? I do think that name will be turned over to them eventually, but when in the litigation is going to be a decision for the judge.
So as we can continue through this, Jane Doe does not say that the assault happened at a commercial establishment. She can't. That wouldn't make any sense. Yet they stand by it. They double down. They triple down. White House, the White House doesn't exist. And then we get to the witnesses. And I think at the outset, everybody has to remember that in 24 years, not a single witness has ever come forward saying this happened. Quarter of a century. Think about that.
So I love how he's pulling sections and snippets from the actual complaint. Here are the allegations Jane Doe made. Here is why they are demonstrably false. That's huge. This is a great argument. And again, we talked about this. This is something that could come out of trial. This is something that could come out of her deposition. You can present this even for summary judgment. Is this argument going to win a motion to dismiss? Very rarely, and not in this case. I was going to say something else. We'll keep going.
She says she's at the party alone, this 13-year-old girl, and she finds herself in the room with the three most famous people at the party. Just think about how unnatural, how little common sense that makes. And according to her, one of the witnesses is a female celebrity who's just standing there watching the repetitive rape of a child. That celebrity does nothing, says nothing, reports nothing. And in fact, they won't even identify her. According to them, there's an adult female in the room watching the rape of a child. They refuse to identify her. So then we continue. And you look and there's celebrities that she says she's mingling with before. Afterwards, she says she runs out of the house naked. Runs out of the house naked. None of them notice that. None of them pay any notice. For 24 years, none of them has said anything. And so she's just asked in this interview.
So these things are more argument, right? She said she was here. She said she just found herself in this room. She said she ran out, without any clothes on. She said, this X, Y, and Z, yet nobody's ever come forward. Nobody's talked about that. The plaintiffs are going to have good arguments about why nobody's come forward, about why there's no witnesses, because the money, the power, the blackmail, the bribes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to say all of that, right? People are too scared. People's lives were lost throughout the years because, you don't want to cross these celebrities. You lose your job, you lose your livelihood, you lose your fame, you lose your power, your money. They're going to have arguments against that. So these types of arguments are less compelling to me if these said, well, why weren't there any witnesses? And why did it take 25 years for this to happen? And why has nobody made this complaint before? There are going to be arguments against those. But the best argument we've heard so far, we're only 3 minutes into it, 10% of the way, is the locations that she said at the time are impossible. Couldn't have happened the way she said they happened. That is scary for a plaintiff's lawyer.
Well, celebrities are recognizable people. Surely you can tell us one celebrity that was there. Just give us one name so we know this happened. And she says, okay, Benji Madden was there. And she wants to conjure up religion and say, I'm religious. I remember his tattoo. She looks and remembers so vividly the tattoo and the conversation with Mr. Madden. And Mr. Madden wasn't there. He already said he wasn't there. His tour schedule said he wasn't there. And he wasn't there because this never happened. None of this ever happened. And you keep going and you ask yourself, well, who is this complaining witness? She does not come forward with her real name. She proceeds under Jane Doe. There's no report to the police. According to her, she never tells anybody for 24 years. Not one person, not alone in the car for 5 hours at home, on her way home.
And again, these are good arguments for the public. They're good arguments for certain jurors. Certain people out there are absolutely going to buy them, but there's going to be a big conglomerate that says we all know why. We know why sometimes victims don't come forward when it's this heinous of abuse. We know about the fear, the money, the power. We know about all of that. Another question people were asking me on the prior video and on Twitter was, why would a lawyer do something like this and give up all of their strategy? Why would they tell all their strategy? And it's a very simple answer. Every case is different. Every lawyer should handle every case differently. Everything's on a case by case basis. You represent clients differently. Certain clients need different arguments made. This is a case where public opinion is going to be important. And he is trying to save face for Jay-Z. He's trying to get out in front of it. He's trying to explain his innocence so that he can remain a popular public figure along with, Beyonce, their kids, everybody else involved, their family involved. That's what this is. Strategy at trial be damned at this point, right? And that he's not as concerned about that. Additionally, if you have a good enough strategy and your strategy is impossibility of timeline, that's going to come out. There's not a lot of hide the ball in civil litigation. We've got to turn things over. I always know what the defense is going to be. The defense always knows what my argument's going to be by the time we get to trial. So there's not a lot of surprises. So speaking it out at this point doesn't mean you can't get additional information, doesn't mean your argument can't change. Some of the facts can't change, but this is more about public opinion than it is strategy in the case. He cares more about what the public thinks about his client at this point than case strategy would be my guess and bet.
Not one person, not a diary, not a family member, not a friend. Most people, when this happens, there's a need to tell somebody. We call these prompt outcry witnesses. In most complaints like this, people tell somebody. She says nobody for 24, 25 years. And then we get to the details. And I want to make sure this is clear. When people make up an account, whether intentionally or their mind is playing tricks on them, they can always get that core part of the story right. They can just keep repeating it over and over and over again. This is what happened, that core part. But they're always going to mess up the details. When something isn't real, when something doesn't happen, you're going to get the details wrong because you weren't really there. And so she starts with her story about her friend that dropped her off. Okay? This drive of over 5 hours, the friend would have had to have gone 10 plus hours to drop her off because she's got to get there. If this is real, she's got to get there. But guess what? This friend of hers, she doesn't get out of the car, right? Think about that. She's just leaving a 13-year-old girl alone in Midtown. She doesn't want to get out of the car. She came all that way. There can't be a witness there. She can't have a witness there because this never happened. So as you keep going, you ask yourself, but how did she end up in the car in the first place? And so she creates this story. She says, I snuck out the window.
Jane Doe, just look in the actual text, bizarrely alleges. He's trying to make it a certain kind of language. Some would even call it nasty language. Some would even call it nasty.
Right? But now we know she came from Rochester. So she would have been sneaking out of the window at 3 in the afternoon in the middle of broad daylight. Never heard of such a thing. Defies common sense. Doesn't make any sense because it's never happened. And so she tells this story because she's got to create a way that she gets out of the house and ends up in New York City. And as we keep going here, the friend that implausibly leaves her there's then some pressure on that part of the story. This doesn't make any sense. And so the lawyer is asked, well, just produce the friend. And so he has to find somebody that can make this work. And of course, as soon as he's pressed, they find somebody who they say is no longer alive. They can't corroborate it. There's nobody to talk to. Okay. And if we can keep going, next slide. So she then gets there, right? And she has this vivid tale of watching it on a Jumbotron. It's in her complaint. Clear as day. There was no Jumbotron that year. Okay. I don't know whether they were Googling images and found the wrong year. I don't know whether she's just making it up out of whole cloth. There is no Jumbotron. In fact, they didn't even get a permit, according to the police and the city, for the Jumbotron that year. So that didn't happen. None of the details are right because this never happened. You keep going. And then she says, I'm knocking on the doors and the windows of limousines and VIPs. Of course, that doesn't work either. If you look at the video, photographs, that whole area was blocked off. We've spoken to numerous people there that were in security. No one could have gotten anywhere near those cars because this never happened. She gets that fact wrong. And the whole story about, of all people, she knocks on Puff's window. 13-year-old girl in Midtown by herself. Just think about that. Think about how illogical that is. Keep going. Again, this is Eminem performing in the streets. No Jumbotron. All the cars barricaded. Her facts don't check out.
By the way, there's some blurred parts in the video. I don't know why. It's coming from the original YouTube video, not from mine, but it is what it is. You kind of get the idea.
Because it's never happened. We keep going. So what ends up happening then, and this is important, is her original account in the original complaint says that at 9:30 or 10, she's told to wait there to get a ride to the after party. Okay? That also doesn't work because there's photographs now of Mr. Combs and Mr. Carter at commercial establishments in New York after the event. So this narrative of at 10 o'clock she ends up at this party can't work. They got caught. So they changed it in the amended complaint.
By the way, this is also why it's so important that you have to give enough information, date, time, and place when you make certain allegations. Because if they are provably false, you should lose. I don't know if anything he's saying is true, right? It's going to bear itself out in discovery and litigation. I get why he's angry if, there's this much information, and I get the vitriol, especially, with Jay-Z being angry. Somebody would just make something up out of thin air if they can prove it wasn't true on the date and time that she said. But that's what the court system is for, is when two parties disagree and they have, factual differences and legal arguments to make. That's what the court system is for. But I think they're on a very good track if they can prove on this date and this time where she said it occurred, there was no house matching description, no jumbotron. The person she said was there was not there, which we can prove. These people were at different locations, which we can prove at the time, an alibi. Even though this is a civil case. Somebody also asked me, I thought Alex Spiro was a criminal lawyer. So he's a defense lawyer, right? But he's a lawyer. He's a litigator. So litigators, which is why, I did a lot more criminal early in my career. I do a lot more personal injury and civil stuff now, but litigators are litigators, right? We can fight in the court system, whether it's in the civil court system, in the criminal court system, we can fight. And this is absolutely a quasi-criminal case. So right up his alley. If criminal defense is his specialty, this is basically a criminal defense case, even though it's technically in the civil court, because basically everything Jay-Z has been accused of is a quasi-criminal civil statute. Now, we as private citizens and civil lawyers can't file criminal complaints. We can't force law enforcement to file criminal complaints. Sometimes it helps when we file a civil case to add criminal charges, but criminal charges have not come at this point for Jay-Z, and maybe we're hearing why. Maybe there's not enough evidence. Maybe even the law enforcement or state attorney's office was like, hey, you go take it to civil court. You've got a lower burden. You've only got to prove by a greater weight of the evidence. We've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And looking at these inconsistencies, I don't think we can. I don't know that that's what they're saying or that's what's going on in the background. I'll just tell you from my experience, that happens sometimes. As a prosecutor looking at cases, it's like, I don't think we can prove it. And even some civil, lawyers can bring in, it's like, I don't think we can prove it, right? Sometimes that happens.
That there's this multiple drop-off and pickup that lands them at this White House that doesn't exist. So as we continue, this is, again, her account of trying to change the story into this multiple drop-off period to get them at the house to deal with the fact that there's photograph of.
By the way, a good move from my perspective for him to say she had to change the story, and now this is something that changed in the amended complaint. Because when you can look back at those changes, you can use them to impeach.
Photographic evidence that that's not really after.
All right, it's frozen here. Let me just make sure that is.
All right. Okay. That also doesn't work because there's photographs now of Mr. Combs. This account continues. You have to look at the timeline. You have to look at the timeline. So there's an old expression that time doesn't lie. Everything else that I'm talking about, these glaring inconsistencies, these are not minor inconsistencies. These are not minor problems with this story. This is utter falsehoods. Time never lies. And so if you look at the time, no matter what, this couldn't have happened. It's not even possible that this happened. And this is so important. So again, now that we know that it's a 5-hour drive in each direction, how she gets to the VMAs, okay, we're going to talk in some detail about this White House and whether or not they could have gotten there. And then again, Doe returns home to Rochester, okay? And this is very important. Because she returns home, she has to leave the New York area by 1:30 in the morning at the latest, okay? You look at any of these White Houses and you look at the closest gas stations that could be to any of these White Houses, you have to leave this White House party by 12:45 in order to get to the gas station at 1:30 to call your father to pick you up to get home to Rochester at 6:30. So remember, she only has till 12:45 for everything that she says to have happened. The VMAs end at after 11. So you're talking about a window of a little more than an hour that this could possibly have happened even by their own account. And she says during that little bit more than an hour, not only does she get to the house, not only is she inside mingling with celebrities, she has a drink. She's then sexually assaulted in front of an adult female multiple times. She gets out of that. She fights through it. She leaves the house naked. She gets all the way to the gas station. She had 37 minutes to possibly do this. Okay, even under their account. Okay, and of course, the biggest problem, perhaps of all, is there's photographs putting Mr. Combs and Mr. Carter at different places, not in a White House during that 37 minutes. So when I tell you that it's not just that this story is a lie and that it's not true, it's provably, demonstrably false. This never happened. So,
strong words, using very strong words, and I got to be honest, he's got a lot to work with. That's a great argument, right? And we'll see, because again, the plaintiffs are going to have their opportunity to put together their evidence and make their arguments, but this is, who we haven't seen a defense like this come out for? Is, so I'll just say some other people. Some other people don't have quite as much evidence to prove that something is demonstrably false that's been accused of their client with this type of timeline, with these pictures, with these details about who was, when, where at these VMAs. This should make a plaintiff's lawyer nervous, or at least let him know you better be able to fill these holes or this thing's going to get nuked. But at this point, the judge is not comparing Spiro's story with Buzbee's story. That's not what she does at a motion to dismiss phase, which is why they lost this, pretty easily. But as we go further in the case, as more discovery comes out, a summary judgment motion in this case, assuming New York does things similarly to how we do here, that could be a big deal. That could be a big deal. Oh, it's federal, right? It's federal. So yeah, these could be very, very, very strong arguments made in a summary judgment case, in a summary judgment portion of a case.
We talked about this 37 minutes. The earliest, even if we didn't have that establishments. Remember, this is innocence on top of innocence. Even if we didn't have that, according to her, the earliest they could have gotten to the house is 12:11. And the reason for that is if the VMAs end and the drive is 20 minutes, the driver has to go there, drop them off, come back, pick her up, bring her back. She can't get there. And again, this is lickety split. This is as fast as is possible. Okay, this is no traffic leaving Radio City in Midtown during an awards ceremony. 12:11. She has to leave that white residence by 12:48 in order for her father to pick her up at the gas station. 37 minutes. That's the entire window of opportunity here. So here again is the timeline. Shows the 11:11 VMAs end, the drop off, the pickup, and the drop off. Next slide. And again, here we are. You see the 37 minutes. This is the 42 minutes it takes to walk. This is the closest gas station. And this is, remember this is a 13-year-old girl walking who has issues, who is maybe drugged according to her, who's just been viciously raped multiple times, who was holding her own clothing, trying to get to a gas station that she had never been before. Okay, no map, no cell phone, no nothing. Straight line, it's 42 minutes. Okay, the story doesn't work, it doesn't check out. Okay, this never happened. Next slide. These are all the things that they claim happened in that 37 minutes. Okay, and again, 37 is giving them every benefit of the doubt as how long this window could be. Every benefit of the doubt. But here's an even bigger problem.
This is pretty incredible to me. What do you guys think? Is this convincing you? Is this convincing you? And just, again, remember to take it with a bit of a grain of salt because there's no rules here. We don't know if all this evidence is reliable. We don't know how all this is going to come in. We don't know if the plaintiffs are going to have arguments or reasons why or explanations or no, you're wrong about this time versus that time. Wouldn't be the first time we saw somebody talk about evidence, even a lawyer at a press conference that comes out, well, no, there's actually an argument that the Google search was made at this time, or there's actually an argument that the VMAs ended at this time, or that this picture was actually taken at a different VMA. So there's of course always going to be arguments, right? There's three stories, his story, her story, and the truth, right? There's three sides to every story. But this is pretty incredible, right? The way he's laying it out, you can understand why they're standing strong on innocence and that none of this happened and this was completely made up.
There are photographs of Mr. Carter and Mr. Combs at commercial establishments during the 37 minutes. They're not there. Even if you try to come up with the fastest possible timeline, I'm talking about no traffic, nobody getting in your way at the door, right to the bar kind of timeline, it still doesn't work because they had to leave Radio City. They had to go to the commercial establishments. Mr. Combs is photographed at two different commercial establishments with Jennifer Lopez, two establishments. They had to go to both of those establishments and get back to the White House. Get back to the White House before she has to leave at 12:30. None of this.
By the way, the easiest argument against this, the absolute easiest argument against this is, her time was wrong. Her time was off. She lost track of time. She was 13 years old. Maybe even the year was off and they figured that out eventually. I don't know. That would obviously not be great. That would be impeachable information, but it's possible that they made some mistakes with this. Now, a lot of people hold that harshly against certain victims and not as harshly against others. So we'll see, but stuff like that, we have to be open to stuff like that coming out through discovery as well.
Can work. And in fact, and I think this is very important, you will notice in the photographs that Miss Lopez changes clothing between the two events they go to in New York City. You can see in one photograph, she's wearing one outfit and another. So she had to be able to, in this 40-minute window.
I bet you Jennifer Lopez absolutely hates, I bet her skin crawls that she is even mentioned in this PowerPoint presentation. Nobody wants to touch any of this with a 10-foot pole.
Get to multiple events. They're seen drinking, socializing. She has to change outfits, change her hair, all within 40 minutes to get to that White House in time. And you're saying to yourself, so that's not possible. You're right, it's not possible. It's because this never happened. And then we get to the end. She kept running until she reached a gas station. The female clerk noticed her, allowed her to use the phone. Plaintiff called her father, admitted that she had lied about her whereabouts. And this is a very small thing, very small. But remember, when you leave house and you're 13, you have to have a story. You either have to sneak out and not have a lie, or you tell your parents a lie. Sort of two options, right? Earlier, she says, well, I didn't tell my parents a lie, I just snuck out the window, right? Here, she says, well, I lied. See, do you know what that means? That means she's lying within her own story. They can't both be true. And I said earlier that no witnesses have come forward in basically a quarter of a century, except for one. Now there's one, her own father, the person who knows her best. And he came forward too. And he said, you know what? This never happened. This never happened. And his attention was drawn to it. I feel like I would remember that. They said, but you've got a lot going on. Maybe you forgot this. You've got a lot going on. They told him, listen, you've got a lot going on. Try to see if they pressed him, if he stuck to his story. He said, you have a lot going on, but that's something that would definitely stick in my mind. Of course it would stick in your mind. You drove 10 hours to pick up your 13-year-old daughter in New York City. It's not something you would forget. It's not something that he did forget because this never happened. And of course, just like the friend that couldn't be there at the beginning, you can't have a witness to something
Not great, obviously, right? And again, I expect a lot of these details to be, hashed out in discovery during depositions.
that never happened. When asked, well, what did you say to your father in the car? What did you talk about? Nothing. She says not a word was spoken. There can't be a conversation because this never happened. And so you got to ask yourself what's going on here, right? And you all saw that videotape of her being interviewed in the shadowy room. She's holding a teddy bear. She's talking about her issues, her head trauma. She's been through a lot in her life, you can tell. And so who took advantage of this? Why are we here? Why is this story getting created? And I'll tell you who took advantage of this. This lawyer took advantage of this. That's what's going on here. And you can see here, now that this is starting.
So now, again, this was way before the court's order. He's not doing this after the court basically told him to chill. And this he's doing in the presser. He's not doing it in a court filing at this point. So, again, context is really important to all of this, but I didn't know this was in here, right? I haven't watched this, but he's about to go at Tony Buzbee. We're going to see some of what we talked about, just a day ago. We're going to see some of it in action here, in living color, as they say.
To unravel and the truth is coming out, he's starting to walk away from it. He's saying, oh, sorry, this case was referred to our firm by another firm, so I didn't really check it out, is basically what he's saying, right? He brings an accusation like
that's not great either.
This. Attacks a man with the integrity of Mr. Carter, and all he has to say for himself now is, well, I didn't really check on this. I got a referral, trying to make a little bit of money, so we just went live with it. Next. Here's again the timeline that he went live with. In the face of this irrefutable, time doesn't lie evidence, he went live with it. And again, it doesn't work. This 37 minutes, it does not work. It does not work.
This is bad news, right? Because this can start affecting other cases, even P. Diddy cases, right? If your allegations are provably wrong and false, and if you are able to prove that one client completely lied to try to get money and you're the lawyer on it and you have a lot of the other cases, that can absolutely have a domino effect. Now, this could be wrong or this could be one bad apple. It also can happen, right? If you have a class action lawsuit, right? Because I've been a part of some class action lawsuits, and you have thousands of clients calling you saying, yes, this happened to me. I took this medication, or I went to this place, or I drank the water, or whatever it may be. My data was breached and I worked for this company on this date. Sometimes you can get in the habit of being like, oh, okay, it's the same story everybody else is telling. Let me put your information in. We'll add you to the list. And maybe the vetting was not as strong on the 2,400th call as it was on the first call, because, we're only human, but that's not really acceptable. And you can't do that. Whether it's a class action, whether it's a case like this, I don't know. I don't care how many calls you get. You have to vet each one of them appropriately to have a good faith basis to go forward with the lawsuit. Now, I'm not saying he did or didn't. I'm just saying these allegations, these public statements, these timelines, Spiro's putting together a pretty darn good argument here.
Because there's photographs. There's photographs. You can find them on the internet of them. They're changing clothes. She's changed clothes. Do you know how long that takes for her to go to 2 events, change clothes, get inside, have drinks? They're socializing. They're not popping into these events. To then get back out into the suburbs somewhere, a house that doesn't exist, it's not possible. Actually not possible. He is for sure innocent of this accusation. Next slide. But this lawyer, he doesn't care about things like this. The only other person he's brought a complaint against for just mere association, merely being at a Sean Combs party, he's already been wrong about that one too. He had to change that one. If you look at the next slide, he got the year wrong. He said there was a party in the Hamptons. Mr. Combs was in Saint Tropez at the time. Didn't check out. 2 claims, neither are checking out. We can keep going. And we have this,
Again, dominoes starting to fall. He knows this case backwards and forwards, right? We're just scratching the surface on it. But this is also a great illustration of how different it is to be a lawyer on a case, elbows deep, digging in, every detail being important, doing your job well, earning your money, right? You better know everything about a case if it is your case.
Individuals calling my office telling me story after story. And, I'm not going to get sidetracked. People think I'm going to start saying, explaining he's a grifter and all these things about him. I'm not here to talk about him more than I need to. But there's people calling the office saying, yeah, they were being pressured to say stuff, to say that they were with Mr. Combs. These are affidavits. They're filed in court. This is what you're dealing with here. Next slide. And so
he's going at him. This is going to be a battle publicly between Buzbee and Spiro. These are 2 guys that I would expect don't back down from much and don't fear much. And I think the judge kind of sees this coming and is trying to pacify it before it gets really ugly.
Who took advantage of the woman in the shadowy video? He gives a press conference, 1-800 number, and he claims 2 days after posting that press conference, 2 days, that he has 120 fully vetted plaintiffs, 120. Anybody that does this for real, anyone that knows what they're doing, knows to corroborate to interrogate and to be sure about even one person takes weeks. One person. You've got to find out if their story makes sense. Did they really get dropped off? Does any of it check out? Is there corroboration? Are there any witnesses? It takes weeks for one. He had 120 in 2 days. When he files these cases,
I mean, I definitely agree. You've got to dig in. You've got to corroborate. You've got to investigate. You got to interrogate. You got to push the right buttons, especially when you're going against big corporations or big celebrities. I don't know that I will put a time period on it that every single one has to take weeks, right? Especially if you have a plaintiff that comes forward and has everything that's fully set out, has their witnesses, has text messages, emails, pictures, whatever it may be, right? I know some of that didn't even maybe exist at the time, but if they have it all laid out, it's possible for it to take less than weeks, but not one phone call. You can't vet cases like this in one phone call. That's why cases like car accident cases, for example, we take a car accident case and then sometimes we do investigation after that because we have to have waivers signed for us to be able to order certain medical records to corroborate injuries and treatment. We order police reports. We order red light cameras or any CCTV footage in the area. We talk to witnesses. Sometimes you can't do all that before you sign a case, but you better do all that before you file a case. Fully vetting and doing the investigation is something you absolutely have to do. And sometimes it takes months, right? He's saying weeks here. Sometimes it can be done quicker than that, but sometimes it takes months. If you have to order official records, if you've got to go back and do certain research and compare certain things and get those documents, sometimes public records, sometimes from companies. Like I said, if you're going to get a camera from a private business, like a gas station, you got to order it. Sometimes you got to go through the legal channels to get certain things. That takes time. It's very hard to do it quickly. I assumed, based on how Tony Buzbee was speaking, that he had done all that prior. Not that he did 120 like this, but that he had been doing it over the last, weeks and months of vetting these cases. And I also assumed, and I think this is a correct assumption, that it wasn't just Tony Buzbee doing this vetting, that there were other law firms, lawyers, and staff doing some of the vetting that he was discussing.
he doesn't even enter his notice of appearance. He just has some other lawyer file and he holds these press conferences. He says, listen, anybody out there, just call the 1-800 number. If you can put yourself anywhere near Sean Combs' party at any point, we can go after the other celebrities there. We can make money together. Just call.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's exactly what he said. I get the people that want to call plaintiffs lawyers shysters, and some of them very much are and do shady things and can be snake oil salesmen, and I get it. But there's nothing wrong with discussing it and working with lawyers in other states. I mean, Spyro himself has worked in other states. I guarantee he has consulted on cases where he has not filed a notice of appearance or has referred a case to a lawyer in another state. I shouldn't say I guarantee, because I can't guarantee that. That would just be my guess and my opinion. Lawyers work with lawyers in other states all the time, and refer cases out, sometimes file notice of appearance if you're going to actually be the one handling the case and doing the work on the case. There are different rules for jurisdictional litigation. We're not going to get into all that right now. But again, using what the other side is giving you and really trying to make him look bad. And that he's doing a good job of it here.
Call the 1-800 number. That's all you need to do. And then we'll send a letter to the celebrity. They're not going to want to have this in the public light. And they're going to be shaken down and they'll send us money. So just call the number. And Mr. Carter said no. He said, it's not going to happen anymore. I'm going to put my foot down. And that's what he did. And I would urge.
It's not going to happen anymore. Does that mean it's already happened to them? I don't know. That was interesting wording. Because he said before, he's never been accused of this before, right?
Urge any other celebrity that's being shaken down right now to do the same thing and to stand with truth. None of this ever happened. And what this 1-800 lawyer is doing, he's taking the justice away from this. He's destroying this opportunity and the voices of real victims. And it's got to end.
There's a couple of very interesting things there. If I'm going to nitpick on words, right? Because words are important. But he encourages any other celebrity to stand on truth because none of this stuff ever happened. Now, if I wanted to be liberal about that, is he including all the P. Diddy stuff? Then he follows it up with, he's ruining justice for real victims. Well, is he talking about the justice for real victims with P. Diddy? Or is he talking generally about justice for true victims? Now, I agree. Anybody that's going to file frivolous claims, that's the worst kind of lawyer that makes good lawyers' jobs so much harder, that makes everything harder on all of us. I'm not ready to say Buzbee has done that in this case, right? We're going to have to see how the system plays out. Just because the defense lawyer or the defendant says the other person's lying doesn't mean it's true. Now, will I say he's very convincing and has a lot of evidence here? Presumably has a lot of evidence here. We'll see how it plays out and what ends up being the final say. But this does not look good so far for this plaintiff, Jane Doe. I will just say that. That's my opinion this far as we're continuing to gather information. Our minds can be changed. Our opinions can be changed. What we think can change as we gather more information and more facts. And this is something that's going to be added to the bucket, but not a good look for them at this point.
So, are there any questions? Yes.
One question. So for the people that are calling your office, I'm assuming if it's not dismissed, like worst case scenario, you guys move forward to try to show that everything you just told us, what evidence are you guys submitting other than the accounts that are giving you over the phone? Like, do any of those people calling you like emails between them and Buzbee or text conversations where they're encouraging this stuff?
Yeah, so let me divide that question into two if I can. We expect the case to be dismissed. If it's not, eventually this will all crumble because it can't possibly have happened mathematically. You don't even need witnesses. They don't have any witnesses because this never happened, and you don't need witnesses because the time doesn't work. Just there's literally photographic evidence that proves that this could not have happened. In terms of what's going to happen to Mr. Buzbee for this racket and everything else going on, time will tell. But this is how things unravel. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Who is Lice Intelligence, and has your firm ever hired them in connection with Tony Buzbee to investigate Tony Buzbee as he alleged?
I don't know that firm, don't know those people, and the answer is no.
So this might just be an extension of the first question, but you said that there were people calling saying they're being pressured to say that with Mr. Connors. Can you elaborate on that, please? Are they calling you to say that they're being pressured?
Yeah, there was a witness that came forward that contacted my office and submitted an affidavit in court regarding this that accounted for what occurred on that day, which was they called the Buzbee firm. They said they had an inquiry. The inquiry had nothing to do with Mr. Combs, Mr. Carter, or any of this. And the people at the Buzbee firm said, well, why don't we try to push this in the direction of the Combs case? That's a better decision in some substance. That's a better way to go here. This individual refused to do that, contacted my office, and then an affidavit was submitted to court.
That alone, if true, just that alone will get you potentially sanctioned, complaint by the bar, and even disciplined or reprimanded by the bar. That is totally inappropriate, never allowed to do it if it happened exactly how he just said.
Yes.
You mentioned the letters that Buzbee's been sending out to unnamed celebrities in relation to these Combs lawsuits. What were your interactions on behalf of Mr. Carter before he was renamed the name of the complaint?
Well, after the letter was received, we obviously knew this was completely false and we weren't going to be shaken down. So the efforts were nothing because there was nothing to discuss in any meaningful way.
Do you know who the Jane Doe is, like her actual identity? Has there been research into that on your end?
Yeah, because it's a fair question. Because she's been blacked out in the video and because a court has not unmasked her in court, I'm not going to get into her identity. You will notice that I did not get into some of her issues. I don't want to. It's really sad in many respects, and I don't want to get into that. So I'm not going to unmask her here today.
He's not going to unmask her, which leads me to believe he knows who she is, right? Which again, I'm only saying that for the argument of prejudice to the defense to not be able to build a defense because they don't know who she is. That prejudice goes away if you do know who she is. And we're just protecting her identity from the public and from the backlash there. But it also goes against, like, she shouldn't be afraid that Jay-Z or Spyro's firm or any of these people are going to do something to her because they already know who she is and they haven't done anything to her, right? Assuming they haven't. I'm just saying, for the legal arguments back and forth.
Has the accuser tried to reach out to Mr. Carter before, or any of his camp, or anyone?
Not to my knowledge. Yes.
Buzbee indicated that there was a second alleged victim. Has he given any notice that he's pursued that case on?
No, and I would hope not after what's going on here. Yes.
You mentioned in your recent filing on this docket that you were intending to file a motion.
By the way, this is like a lawyer's dream. No rules, nobody to tell you to shut up, nobody to limit your time, everybody just hanging on every word you say. This is where you should shine if you're a trial lawyer. So good job. He is shining because this is a very good presentation, a very, very well put together, logical presentation. He made some arguments and there's some fireworks in there, right? And some, comments that are nasty or not so nice. And some salacious comments that are made in there, but some really demonstrably important things, locations that don't exist, timelines that don't fit, demonstrably provable facts that are false, no witnesses, no evidence, changing the complaints, changing once you've been proven to be wrong. Very, very good information for a defense lawyer to have.
Motion to dismiss. What's the timeline on that? Are you working on it?
Yeah, so we did file a motion to dismiss the day after this was filed.
Right.
The Rule 11 letter, which basically says that a lawyer is not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to not vet a claim and file a false claim in court, or it needs to come down. The way that works, and it's a little technical, is that the court has to allow you to file faster than you should otherwise be allowed to file. So we are hopeful that the court will respond today, and we will file that. If not, there are other things that we're going to do to bring the truth to light.
By the way, to ask for 21 days to become 1 day is just a show of confidence as well. But the judge is like, no, you're not going to be able to do that. And we talked about the Rule 11 motion that he says Tony Buzbee should be sanctioned for this. And again, we've had those filed against us for literal car accident claims. It's crazy. Like certain defense lawyers will just file them for anything. And we're like, okay, there's a police report with witnesses right here, dude. And like I said, never have any of them come to fruition. I believe we've successfully settled every single one of those cases where somebody's filed those motions, but they try to put pressure sometimes. And they try to, bully different lawyers around, and some respond differently to them, I guess. But again, seems like he has a good faith basis to file something like that. It doesn't seem like he's going to win on it, but we can understand more now after this presser why he feels so strongly the way he feels.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Are there any witnesses who will be corroborating Mr. Carter's testimony that he was not there that night? Or is that sort of what you're hinting at, that if necessary, you will provide those people?
Yeah, I mean, it's like asking you to corroborate something that never happened. I mean, there's going to be, there are dozens and dozens of people that are going to say there was no party at the White House, that put all of these celebrities where they're already put in photographs in different places, not at the White House. Remember, according to her, all three of these people, I mean, you all have seen the photographs. I mean, on the internet, I just showed you some. All three of these people would have had to have been at this White House together, alone in a room. Just think about that. Alone in a room with this 13-year-old girl at exactly the time that their commercials happened.
I believe they're also outing that the female celebrity that watched was at least allegedly J-Lo. That's what it seems like is coming from this. And again, I may be connecting dots. I'm not stating that as a fact. That just kind of seems like what he's hinting at, which again, not great for her.
Establishments. So that there's no proof better than time. But of course, there are going to be people that are going to say that they were all out that night and nowhere near a White House, and they went to an after party commercial establishment. This is all fancy.
If this case is dismissed after that, you guys decided that you didn't follow anything, in addition to information.
This issue with a lawyer taking advantage of the situation is going to be dealt with, I can assure you. And I think sort of stay tuned. I think the first thing today was to make sure that everybody understands. This is not an account of inconsistencies. I wanted everybody to understand that this.
I wonder if he's going to be as confident about that after reading the judge's order, right? And again, I still think if what's in that affidavit is true, you go down to Texas where Buzbee is barred, and maybe the state bar handles something like that. But I don't know if he thought the federal judge was going to do something to reprimand Tony Buzbee, but that is not at all what happened in the order. And in fact, the exact opposite happened.
Never happened. This is completely false. And then we'll move forward from there. Yes.
What is Mr. Carter's account of that night? Does he say he was at multiple locations, just that nightclub, Lotus nightclub that he was photographed at?
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into sort of privileged communications and talk too much about that, but I will say that he was not at any house or any location. They were in New York City. They were at commercial establishments with lots of people around. This is obviously completely false.
How's Mr. Carter feeling?
He's upset. He's upset that somebody would be allowed to do this, would make a mockery of the system like this. He's upset that this distracts and dissuades real victims from coming forward. He's upset that his kids and his family have to deal with this. He's upset. They should be upset.
And I get that 100%. I think any person would. Him being a celebrity or really rich doesn't change that. If you did not do something like this and you were accused of it and you have a family and a life, it's going to be miserable. So I totally get that.
Is your firm investigating Buzbee, talking to people around him as he's alleged in some of his legal suit against him?
Yeah, that suit went nowhere, as you saw. And what happens when people bring frivolous cases and run rackets like this is, of course, we're asking questions. I've got people contacting my office telling me chapter and verse about him. So we don't shut off the phone lines. I'm listening because I'm trying to figure out how this is allowed to proceed like this. Yes.
He posted a photo on his Instagram.
And also, a lot of times, the bigger you get, the more enemies you get, right? I mean, that's true in so many facets of life, as many of us can find out in different ways. But yeah, so I mean, Tony Buzbee, big name, handled a lot of cases, beat down a lot of people, has ruffled a lot of feathers, has probably lost plenty too. Any lawyer has done it as long as he has, in as many different ways as he has. It's going to be people that don't like you. You're going to have made enemies. Are they legitimate, right? How are you going to vet his enemies? And who wants their pound of flesh from Tony Buzbee, right? That's going to be part of this whole saga as well. My mind is kind of spinning just to think about how deep this could truly go.
3 men at a door of his client, suggesting that investigators came and said that they would pay $1,000 for plaintiffs to file a suit against him. I mean, do you have any connection to those men that he photographed? Do those men have any connection to Emmanuel?
Zero. I don't know whether it's completely false or not, but zero connection to those people. No idea what that is. Don't know whether he made it up out of whole cloth. Don't know if he's trying to distract from what.
And that's them talking about Buzbee saying, they're doing that. They're paying people for dirt. We're not doing it. And both sides pointing the finger saying, you're both trying to push people. You want to push people to say bad things about Buzbee. You want to push people to say bad things about Jay-Z and P. Diddy. It's just everybody pointing the finger at this point. It's dirty. None of it feels good at this point. None of it feels like real legal cases, right? This feels like a movie. This feels like the Twilight Zone a little bit.
He's under now, but no, there's no truth to that. Anything else?
And this is why unethical lawyers make things so difficult, because once you start to be unethical and you start pointing fingers and people pointing fingers at each other, it's like once somebody is provably unethical, everything becomes difficult from there. Everything becomes a gray area. We saw it in the YSL case. We'll see if that's what's happening here. I don't know yet.
Right. Will Mr. Carter say anything more specifically about Mr. Combs? He didn't really address him in his statement, but anything since outlets and internet speculation have tried to affiliate him, he didn't really in his statement specifically say anything about any of the allegations.
I mean, Mr. Carter has nothing to do with Mr. Combs' case or Mr. Combs. They knew each other professionally for a number of years, just like in all professions. People know each other. At the music awards, they support each other. You go to the NBA All-Star game, they support each other. That's just how professions work. There is no closer association between any of them. That's also a matter of fiction. That's all that there is. He doesn't know anything about the charges or allegations against him. He has nothing to do with that case.
Great answer, right? You have to distance yourself. I don't really care, what anybody else is going to say about this. They worked together. That was it. It was business relationship. It was people in the same industry supporting each other. It was nothing further than that. He knows nothing about the allegation. Great answer. You got to distance yourself from that because there seems to be a lot more evidence and corroboration and a lot more victims for P. Diddy, alleged victims.
And there's nothing more to say. Yes.
If there was no filing before, and even after there was a second, the woman celebrity that even she was in the room, that woman celebrity, whoever it is, has there been any other people that may have been with Mr. Carter or even up that night that I reached out to you guys just wanting to know what is happening, just so that they can prepare for kind of even a fight back as Jay-Z is right now?
Well, we know other celebrities have received letters, and we've spoken to other celebrities that were there that night that say this is what they know about this. This makes no sense, couldn't have happened because they were all at a commercial establishment. So I hope that answers your question. Yes.
Was there a specific amount of money or something specific that was demanded of Mr. Carter in this demand letter that was sent to you before the complaint was filed?
There isn't a specific number that has been demanded.
But did they specifically ask for money in the demand letter? What?
Yeah. So I've been asked this question before. People like this, they don't send demand letters out to not get money. That's all they want. Okay. This is not for truth and justice. This is for money. So the request was to sit down and talk about a way to resolve this matter, and we all know what that means. Yes.
Do you have any plans to release the demand letter?
Not as I stand here today. I'm more concerned with making sure that everybody knows this didn't happen. I know.
I would love to ask him what he thinks about demand letters or who sends legitimate demand letters, what's in them, what does he think about them as a defense lawyer? I'd love to have more of a conversation with him about that because it's easy to just be like, oh, they're just extorting people asking for money. And, maybe Buzbee is, I don't know. I don't know Tony Buzbee personally, but there are very legitimate law firms and people who represent injured victims, and a demand letter is a way to get to justice for that client. And it's easy to say it's not, it's just about money or quick money grab. But like in the civil justice system, you go to trial and you win, guess what? You get money at the end. So if you don't have to re-victimize your client, there is a benefit to that. Believe it or not, anybody that's been a victim, I think can understand that.
There's a lot of questions about this lawyer and who's after him and how much wrong has he done and these questions. And I totally understand that and respect those questions, but we'll turn to that later. Anything else? Okay. Thank you all very much.
We'll turn to that later. We're not going to talk about that, but we'll turn to that later. And so will we. One thing question I had for you guys. Let's say all this goes Spyro's way and Jay-Z's way, and they win and it's provably false and this client was making it up. Let's just say all that's true. How would that affect your opinion of the P. Diddy victims in the P. Diddy case? Would it affect it? Would it change it? Because I do think this would and can affect public perception. But I want to know what you guys think. I want to take the pulse of this crowd and the people watching and listening here. If you are watching, hit that like button. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the page. That's all we got. I got to run. Continue on. Let me know what you want to hear. If anything else is popping off this week, we will check it out. But for right now, that's all I got. Till next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.